I would like to introduce our speaker, Jeff Jackson. He's employed by the Arkansas Department of Agriculture since 2006, where he currently serves as Standardization Training Officer for the Retail Food Program. In this position, he's responsible for training and standardization of all retail food staff in state, as well as working to ensure conformance with the National Voluntary Retail Food Program at Arkansas State University. In 2005, and he has earned his Bachelor of Science in Education with a emphasis in biology, and a Post Baccalaureate Certificate in Public Health from the University of Arkansas at Medical Sciences in 2013. He was selected to Cohort 5 of the National Environmental Public Health Leadership Institute and was the 2017 recipient of the Mid-Continental Association of Food and Drug Officials Achievement Award. So without further ado, Jeff Jackson, you have the stage.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone being here today. I expected a big crowd, and we've got a pretty decent crowd. So glad to be here. Let me get my screen share going, and we'll get started here right away. So first off, I see several faces that I recognize or that I've seen before, but some of y'all I don't know or who don't know me. So I want to first say that I support agriculture. I grew up on a cattle farm my entire life. I've lived right here in north central Arkansas my entire life and really have no desire to live anywhere else. The farming way of life is something that's very dear to my heart. And so I know a lot of times the health department is seen kind of as an adversary, but I'm trying to change that because I do understand the things that impact farmers and the things that y'all care about. And so I try to find a good balance between maintaining public health and supporting agriculture. So with that being said, we'll talk a little bit about the homemade food production law that's changed recently, and we'll go into that. I'll go through these fairly quickly because I do want to have plenty of time for questions at the end. So a little short history of homemade food sales in Arkansas. Prior to 2009, there was no homemade food sales were allowed at all. Then in 2009, we got the Cottage Food Act, and the Cottage Food Act allowed for the sales of baked goods, candy, fruit butter, jams, jellies, direct to the consumer from the home where they were produced or they could also be sold at a farmer's market, county fair, or a special event. There were several changes to that law over the years. Some amendments allowed for the sale of uncut chocolate-covered fruit and berries, sales at online farmers markets, and sales at pop-up shops. And then in 2021, it was expanded by Act 306 that would allow internet and delivery by mail, or internet sales and delivery by mail. However, the Food Freedom Act superseded that act. And so we'll talk about that right here. So the Food Freedom Act, or Act 1040, allows the sale of any non-time temperature control for safety food to an informed end consumer and expands on the locations and methods that you can use to sell these foods. So it completely erased the Cottage Food Act and replaced that language with a whole new act. And there's a link to that act here on the screen. So I've sent these slides out that I think will be shared with you. So be sure and click on that if you want to look at the entire act. So first, we need to talk about what is time temperature control for safety food. So in short, it means any food that requires temperature control for safety to keep bacteria from growing in that product. And that includes animal foods, meaning foods that are of animal origin, like meat, poultry, seafood, dairy. And it doesn't matter whether it's raw or it's heat treated. All animal foods have to be considered TCS foods and require temperature control. Food of a plant origin that is heat treated or consists of raw seed sprouts, cut melons, cut leafy greens, cut tomatoes, garlic and oil mixtures, and then we have some water activity and pH charts that we're going to discuss very briefly. I just want y'all to kind of understand some of the science behind this. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on it. So water activity, when we're talking about that, we're talking about the amount of water that's available for bacteria to grow. So bacteria need certain things just like we do to survive. They need a food source, they need a adequate environment, they need oxygen or lack of oxygen. Some of them don't require oxygen, but they all need things. But water activity is one of the ways that we can measure that. So if a food has a lot of water in it that's available to bacteria, then it would be said to have a high water activity, okay? And that range is 0 to 100, or I'm sorry, 0 to 1, with 1 meaning all of the water in that product is available to bacteria, okay? pH, we all remember that from basic high school chemistry. It's how acidic or basic a substance is. And so if you look on the chart below, you'll see that stomach acid is a pH of about 1, lemon juice is about 2, whereas milk, water, and blood, they're all around 7. And then you get into the bases with bleach and soap and things like that that are a little higher on the scale of about 12 or 13, okay? So I talked about those pH and interaction tables, and let me find my little laser pointer thing here real quick. And so if you look at these charts, they can get very confusing, but all you really need to know is, so table A is for foods that have been heat treated and subsequently packaged. So those foods, the water activity doesn't really matter so much as long as the pH is below 4.6. All of those foods there are considered non-TCS. And so we use that 4.6 in the law to define whether or not a product can be sold or not. So the Food Freedom Act defines non-TCS food as food that does not require time or temperature control for safety, to limit pathogenic microorganism growth or toxin formation, and as defined in the rules of the Department of Health. So that "and as defined in the rules" is what I just talked about, the water activity and the pH requirements. So it gave us a scientific foundation for how we can determine what is a TCS food or what is not. And then the Food Freedom Act also mentioned an informed end consumer. So it's important for us to know what that law defines that as. An informed end consumer is a person who last purchased the product, who cannot resell the product, and has been informed that the product is not regulated, inspected, certified, or made in a facility that is state licensed, permitted, inspected, or regulated. And every product sold under that act has to have specific labeling and disclosures to inform that end consumer of those facts. So the labeling and disclosure requirements, every package or every food item that's sold has to be labeled with the following information. You have to have the name, address, and telephone number of the producer. There is an option where you can get a unique ID number from the Department of Agriculture if you're afraid to put that information out for the public. And so you turn your information into the Department of Agriculture, they will give you an ID number, and you can put that ID number on your product instead of your name, address, and phone number. But if an outbreak occurs or something like that happens, we can get with the Department of Agriculture, get your ID number, and come and talk to you about some of the things that may be causing these problems. You also have to have the common or the usual name of the food, the ingredients that are in the food, and descending order of predominance. So we'll look at an example of a label here in just a second. I'll explain that a little further. And then you also have to have the statement, this product was produced in a private residence that is exempt from state licensing and inspection. This product may contain allergens. So this statement has to be on there exactly as it's written in order to be in compliance with the law. And the labeling information has to be on the package or on the container if the product is offered from a bulk container. So for example, if you have muffins in a display case and you're selling individual muffins at the farmer's market, then you need to have the labeling information available on the display case as a placard. And then you also have to provide a separate document with all the required information to the consumer at the time of sale. For products that are sold online, you also have to have the labeling and disclosure information available online as well, in addition to the package that you ship it in. So here's a couple of examples of labels. You'll see here that we have grape jelly from J&K Farms, owned by John and Kelly Jones, 123 Sesame Street. And this is their phone number. We have it identified as grape jelly. Our ingredients are in order of predominance. So there's a lot of sugar in grape jelly. There's more sugar than there is grape juice, so we have to put sugar first. Sugar, grape juice, and pectin. Those are our ingredients. We have our statement that the product was produced in a private residence, and then we also have to have the date that it was manufactured. So this is a good label for those who are going to include their name and information on there. If they opt to use the Department of Agricultural ID number, then the label remains exactly the same. However, they can put their ID number in right here instead of that. Okay. So how can we sell it? Sales have to be directly between the seller and the consumer. And these transactions can be in person, by telephone, or online. So, I mean, you're really not restricted in how you can sell your product. And your delivery can be either in person from a retail space, it's at the farm, home, or office where you're producing the food. You can deliver it by a producer or an agent of the producer. So you can have an employee who runs the delivery route if you'd like. You can use a third-party vendor. So you can take your product to retail and grocery stores, and they can sell your product on the shelf. However, those products have to have the disclosure statement displayed, and home-produced products have to be separated from any product that is produced under an inspection. So it has to be in a separate place in the facility. And also, food freedom foods cannot be used or served in a restaurant. So you can't sell to restaurants for them to serve to their customers. But it could be sold in a restaurant if they have a retail space in the restaurant and want to put local foods out for sale. I will speak a little bit to some of the liabilities surrounding these products. So don't be surprised if some retailers choose not to put your product on the shelf due to liability concerns, because the way food law works, any person who is involved in the sale of a product that causes someone to get sick can be liable. And so they may have advice from their attorneys not to sell foods that are home produced. So just be aware of that. It's nothing against y'all. They're just trying to protect themselves. You can also use a third-party carrier like the mail or parcel post or a courier. And transactions can occur in Arkansas or in another state if the seller complies with all federal laws. So if you do sell out of state, our law only applies to products within the state of Arkansas. Once they're shipped to another state, then you may be in violation of the laws of that state, and you could find yourself in some sort of legal jeopardy. So I would be very cautious about selling outside of the state of Arkansas. And if I did, I would want to make sure that whatever state I was sending it to is not going to have an issue with that. Prohibited foods under the Food Freedom Act include any product that contains meat, poultry, seafood, or dairy. Cut tomatoes or cut leafy greens. And to be clear, cut leafy greens does not include greens that have been cut from the root in the field or a harvest cut. However, if you take that lettuce and you chop it up into a salad, then it is processed and it's a TCS food. So you can sell lettuce as long as it's just a single harvest cut in the field. Garlic and oil mixtures, any food of plant origin that is heat treated. And we do have an exception for pickles and acidified vegetables that we'll talk about in just a second. They technically would fall under this, but there's a specific exemption in the rule that allows them to be sold. And then we also would prohibit seed sprouts. And just for clarity, seed sprouts are not the same thing as microgreens. So microgreens that consist of sprouted seeds that are harvested after the emergence of true leaves are allowed to be sold, provided they're only cut once during harvest. If you have intact roots or the cotyledons are still under or undeveloped, then they would be considered sprouts. So keep that in mind as you're growing those types of products. We also don't allow low acid canned foods. And what that means is the food itself, the green bean or the corn or the asparagus, is not highly acidic. And so those products typically have to be canned using a pressure canner instead of a water bath canning method. So the easy way to figure out if you can use this product or sell your product under food freedom or not is, does the recipe call for water bath canning or for pressure canning? If it calls for pressure canning, then you cannot sell the product. But some of these are some of the foods that would be included. I will give examples in the next few slides. This is by no means an all-inclusive list. And so just keep that in mind. It would be impossible to try to list everything that could possibly be done. More prohibited foods. Again, we talked about dairy products, but we're talking about butter, sour cream, cheese. Those would all be considered dairy products. Daily salads like potato salads, coleslaw, pea salad, casseroles and meals can't be sold, and foods that require refrigeration, such as tres leches cakes, pumpkin pie, tiramisu, cream cheese or cheesecakes. We do allow under food freedom several foods, and several foods are new, and we'll really expand the things that you can talk about. And so I'll spend a little bit more time talking about these foods because I think that's really more what you're interested in, what you can do, and instead of what you can't. So it allows for the sales of all things that were previously allowed under cottage food. And then it also adds dried, dehydrated, and roasted products. So things like baking mixes, dry beans, dried fruit, dried herbs, and seasonings, those can all be sold now. It also allows for icings, fillings, and frostings, such as buttercream, gum paste, fondant, and glazes. And then it also allows for the sale of acid and acidified foods, which are canned fruits that have a pH below 4.6, canned salsas, tomato sauce, tomato juice, and things like that, all with a pH below 4.6, pickled products that have a pH below 4.6, canned pie fillings, again, pH below 4.6, as well as condiments that have a pH below 4.6. And these products that are acidified and acid have some more stipulations. And so I'm going to go into those with this next slide. So these products, in order to sell acid and acidified foods, you have to use a recipe that's approved by the Department of Health, or you can have your process and your product tested by what's called a process authority, which is a scientist who will analyze your product and your process and make sure that it's going to produce a safe product that has a pH below 4.6. Or you can test each batch using a calibrated pH meter to confirm that your product has a pH below 4.6 before sale. And each product that is produced under this has to be labeled with a unique number for each batch. So you have to put a batch number on your product as well as the other required labeling information. And the producer has to keep records that include the batch number, the recipe that was used, the source of where they obtained the recipe, or the pH of that product as they measured it at the time of production, and the date that you prepared it. So all that information has to be kept on records. And should the Department of Health have a question about your product, we may ask to see those records. And so you would need to provide those to us to ensure that you are in compliance with the law. Another thing on the acid and acidified foods is as you see in the homemade food production guideline, which I'll have it linked to later, there is recipes provided in that document. Those recipes are the only recipes that would meet the first part of this previous slide that says must use a recipe approved by the Department of Health. So if you're not using one of those recipes that we have listed in that guideline, then you have to follow one of these other two options in order to comply with the law. So just to kind of summarize this, foods that are produced under the Food Freedom Act have to be produced in a home kitchen, you have to label with a name, address, and telephone number, or an ID number from the Department of Agriculture. They have to be labeled with the date that you produced them, and the ingredients in descending order of least or greatest to least, and labeled with the disclosure statement, this product was produced in a private residence that is exempt from state licensing and inspection. This product may contain allergens. And then you can sell your products at farmers markets, in grocery stores or other stores, from the home or ranch or wherever you're producing the products. You can sell them by the internet, and you can sell them, or you can ship them using a commercial carrier, or which would be mail or UPS or whoever. They cannot be sold to someone other than the end consumer. So the end consumer has to be the only one who can purchase them. You can't sell them to someone who's going to resell them. And they can't be sold for use in restaurants. Here is the link that I promised for the food production guidelines. And I know it's long, and there's probably not any way you're going to be able to write that down. So you can go to our website and type in homemade food guidelines, homemade food production guidelines, and you should be able to search our webpage for it. Additionally, as I said before, these slides will be provided. And that is the end of my presentation. I wanted to save some room at the end for questions. This is my contact information displayed. You can write that down. I would encourage you to contact me with any questions that you have, and we'll go from there. So let me look at the chat and see if there's any questions in there. And I guess, I'm sorry, I don't see, Vet will probably call on anyone who has a question verbally. Okay, I see a question from Lisa Sanders that says, I cook with alcohol, is that allowed? So you can cook with alcohol provided the alcohol content of your final product is 0. There is a exception in the law that's actually an alcoholic beverage control law that allows for confectionaries. So candies like cordial cherries and things like that, they can have a little bit of alcohol present in them, provided that the alcohol is not a liquid form and it's in a solid form. But if it has alcohol in it, that's outside of a confectionery, then it cannot be sold under the Food Freedom Law. I see another question about selling vanilla extract or cinnamon extract. If you're extracting that using alcohol and the alcohol content remains active, then you cannot sell those products under Food Freedom. Oh, also, I will put a link. I've got that pasted right here. I'm going to put the link for the homemade food guide in the chat, so you will have that access easily. Any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can see everybody. It's hard to see everybody if I'm not looking at you.
I think you've got all the questions answered that I've seen. Well, I think there's one more that just came through. It's from Danette Span, and she's asking, hold on, let me pull it back up.
I can see it. It says, is there going to be a chance that nutrition info will need to be listed, or is that exempt? And so the nutrition info requirement is a federal requirement that the FDA puts out. They do have exemptions for small producers that are currently in place. I can't say that there's a chance that that's going to be required or not required, but that would be a federal decision. I don't really see it happening, but you never know, and it would be outside of something that I would have any control or influence over. So, I don't think it will happen, but anything is possible.
Okay, I'm just scanning to see if there's any hands up. I don't see anything else well, something just came through. Let's see. Okay, so you're getting thanks for your time. And on behalf of the Office in Agriculture, we thank you too for spending your lunch with us today and bringing us this information that's pretty much hot off the press. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you also for being with us for our first Lunch and Learn session. Please let us know how we did at info@arwomeninag.org. Again, that's info@arwomeninag. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if you have any topics that you'd like to hear about, and we will definitely consider it for our next Lunch and Learn session. So make sure you check out our website and follow us on Facebook so you can find out when that is. Forward to.
I think we just lost Yvette, but thank you all for participating in our Lunch and Learn session today. Like Yvette said, if you have any suggestions for future Lunch and Learn sessions, we hope you will email us those. Make sure you like us on Facebook at Arkansas Women in Agriculture and follow us on Twitter at AR Women in Ag. And we have some exciting news coming this week. We just launched our new website. The link to that is in the chat. We hope that you'll check it out. And our logo was refreshed. You can see it as my background here, and we'll be sharing more about that on our Facebook page this week. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to Jeff. He included his contact information right there, or you can email us at Women in Agriculture. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you have a great day.